Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
I'm now joined by the master of the Den, Gavin Duffy. Gavin, you've been investing in businesses in the Den since 2009, but I've noticed that in this series, the amount of investment being sought by the promoters is lower than previous years. Is this symptomatic of a more conservative entrepreneurial culture?
There's been a few in looking for 20 or 30,000 euro, and you might say, does that mean the figures are lower? But there's been a few around 100 to 150 as well. I think the thing that has changed since Dragon's Den first started in 2009 is that the local enterprise offices and Enterprise Ireland on a national level are supporting entrepreneurs now in a better way, bigger way than they were before. And therefore, those who would have normally had to come into Dragon's Den in 2010, 11 and 12 because we were probably the only game in town at that stage because of the economic crash. They're getting support and going elsewhere. And I'm delighted for them that they're getting that funding from an Enterprise Ireland at a nominal 10% equity. Now they have to have match funding for it, Karl, but I think that's partly the reason. I don't think they lack ambition, but there is something different about this series. I think you'll have noticed, was the week before last, I made a €100,000 offer. I pushed very hard to do a deal, but we couldn't meet on the equity. And that just proves that outside of the Den, there are other funding options for the promoters who come in to pitch to us. So, I think that's a healthy thing.
On last Sunday night's episode, we saw you invest in the jam business. What attracted you to this particular venture?
It was just the couple, Kieran and Claire Moran, and it was recorded some weeks back, so I've got to know them very well working with them. They're just a fantastic couple. And you're right, sort of, money for jam, why would you do it? Getting into supermarket multiples is always difficult, although they seem to have cracked the distribution and are going through Musgrave's central billing, which is, a great achievement for a company that started up some years back. But it was just the work ethic of the couple, their commitment to it. It's, a challenging one to do a jam that looks and feels artisan, but you're doing it at a scale that it's, enjoying national distribution. But I think that's a company that's going to grow, and I'm looking forward to helping Claire and Kieran Moran, grow it in Ireland and then look to the UK.
And we recently saw you join forces with Chanel McCoy and Eleanor McAvoy when investing in Moxie Loves. How does a three-way investment like this work from a practical perspective, as you could have three strong personalities that will have different strategies for the company?
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Karl. It's not that I'm a lone ranger, but it's rare enough for me to do joint investments in the Den, because I always think, and it frustrates me slightly when the person in the Den who's come in to pitch says, oh, it's great, I'm getting 2 dragons for the price of 1. But I think the danger is sometimes that with 2, it sort of falls between the stools. And I would be slightly concerned that even more so if there's 3 dragons involved, as is the case with our investment in Pamela Laird and Moxie Loves and our first product, Eyecatcher. But one of the things that, there's more said in the Den that ends up on the programme, obviously, because of editing and that. And one of the things when I was coming on board in that investment, and it was I who had to propose a 3-way split, because I thought I might be outmaneuvered by the 2 ladies, and I loved Moxie Loves so much, I very much wanted to be on board. But one of the little discussions we had, whilst that was being decided in the Den, was that Chanel was going to take the lead on that, because I've quite a few investments in this series. We still have a few weeks to go, and there's more in the pipeline. So with that in mind, I thought it was very important when there was three of us making an investment that one commits to being the leader. And it avoids hopefully the problem that you raised.
And once you've finalised an investment, what does Gavin Duffy do within that business in the first 100 days?
Well, the first 100 days will be key, and this year it's slightly different because some of the investments are coming to television 2.5 or 3 weeks after we've just made the investment. In years gone by, we might do the recording before Christmas and it mightn't air until March, so you had a longer time frame to get everything right. But it is being ready to maximise the exposure on television, because that's the great bonus of Dragon's Den. You get a national TV launch for your product or service. I still see, and sad to say it's happened again in this series, that websites crash on the night just with the amount of traffic that goes to them when you've up to 500,000 people watching the programme, and people do watch programmes now with their devices in their hands. They go to the website and the traffic knock over a website unless you've upped your hosting and all of that. So I do those sort of things with them. But look, there's no great secret here, and I'm sure any of the people who I invested in last year and the ones I've invested this year would say, I think every day of the first 100 days, Gavin mentioned to us sales. Are we on the phone? Are we knocking the doors? Are we calling to the shops if we're in retail? Are you doing the foot slog that's necessary when you're building up a brand? Likewise, that's what I'm concentrating on. And I'm sort of there, hopefully as a well-intentioned mentor, but I am pushing them along and just reminding them that it's all about sales.
And ultimately, as an investor, you'll be looking to see significant sales increases. But over the last 8 years, what strategies have worked best with the companies that you've invested in?
The one thing I find amusing looking back over the 8 series so far is every figure that's ever been predicted or projected in the Den never turns out to be even close to reality. If it's a really successful investment, it's multiples 10 or 20 times of what their best hopes were, which would have been the case with a Hen Party or with a Tan Organic. If it's something that doesn't work out, it doesn't make half of what their best estimate was. So I always take those projections with a pinch of salt, and if it's to be a successful business, I expect it to go much better than that. And the strategy is how much hype can you get around the product? How much other press exposure of Dragon's Den can you get to really drive the product? And then, get the best, depending where they are in the development of the company. But if it's a consumer-facing brand, what's their distribution? What stores are they in? And that's what the strategy has got to be. And I think looking to the sort of longer-term, bigger picture, I think people might be surprised to say I advise people not to rush to the UK, get over all of the little distribution glitches that inevitably come with any startup, and then when you're that little bit wiser from that experience, then and only then are you ready to enter the UK, which is a multiple of 10 to 15 of what you've been doing up to now. So you have to be able to be ready for that growth, that sudden burst of growth, and you're going to have the cash and perhaps further money to fund that.
And Gavin, is it the case that when you enter the business, you realise that more funding will be needed in order for it to reach its targets or goals?
I'm not sure I should be saying this, Karl, but look, to be very frank with you, my strategy is this. I invest in the Den, and let's say it was 40k. I try and get a significant percentage, which to some viewers might look a bit rich, but that's to be of interest to me, and for me to put the time and effort into it, it's got to be somewhere between 25 and 30%. Sometimes I'll make exceptions and go either go lower than that, but that's what I'm looking for. But if that business requires, as it sometimes would, more funding, particularly on entry into the UK, well then I would make that money available to the company. I would do it as an interest-free loan or a very small coupon loan, as we call that. There's a nominal payment as well for the use of those funds for 12 months or whatever. That's what I've done in a number of the companies. But also, I would say to people who are running businesses, there are other ways you can, get better value for your money. So I do remember some years back with Aruna sauces when we were going into the UK. This was a pour-over curry sauce. We talked to Panasar, the big curry producer in the UK, because we were getting a listing from Tesco. We had to, it was Tesco nationwide across Britain. So that's a huge jump in scale. The packaging costs alone were exorbitant because it was in a pouch. But we spoke to Bill Panasar, the boss of Panasar Foods in the UK, and we negotiated a deal that he would pay for the packaging and we'd pay for it then, as with each order. And that, saved us in cash flow terms about 120,000 sterling at the time, So there are ways to, be able to run farther with less fuel if you can do deals like that.
Gavin, you mentioned earlier about not rushing into the export market, but from your experience, how far into the process do you consider the export potential of the product? And what, in your opinion, are the best export strategies to implement?
From day one, I'm thinking of when are we going to export? When are we going to be in other markets? And you asked about strategy. Look, it comes down to one word, Karl, distribution. It is finding and appointing and working with the best distributors.
And what advice would you give to business owners listening to this morning's show in terms of how to choose the right distributor? Because I often hear from business owners on the show that the easy thing is to appoint a distributor. The difficult thing is to get the distributor working for you.
I don't have any magic sauce with for discovering the best distributors. The advice I would give to people is in negotiating a situation with a distributor, whatever the agreement is, set very clear timelines about what you're looking to achieve in the first 6 weeks and in the first 6 months. And in that original discussion be saying, look, if this isn't going right after the first 6 weeks, how do we both exit from this without hurting one another? Because if they haven't been performing, straight away for you, then you're not really that important. You're not a huge priority for them. And, there's no point doing business with them. But look, it's a difficult one. And, finding the right distributor is just a key thing to making your product work in an export market.
And as an investor and indeed a business owner, what is your approach to tackling the uncertainty and challenges which Brexit will inevitably bring to Irish business owners?
Yeah, and the fashionable thing is, I should say now, Brexit is terrible, we don't know what's going to happen. If I was in the food and agri sector, and I'm saying all businesses have to be very aware of the issues that could arise for Brexit, but we've very little control over it, so you should insulate yourself against that. What concerns me is, I think I've heard ministers, I was going to say 11 ministers, about 4 or 5 ministers, each of them I've heard at least once or twice, but I counted up 11 times I've heard them saying the policy of the government is to mitigate the fallout of Brexit, right? I think if you're mitigating something, you're already accepting that, this is going to be very bad, and success is it's less bad than it might have been because I mitigated it. I think we need to start looking at the opportunities of Brexit.
And Gavin, on a different topic completely, crisis PR is something that we are becoming more and more exposed to. But in your experience, what are the do's and do nots of crisis PR?
Yeah, how long have you got? Because this is something I've pretty extensive experience in. Look, it's frightening these days the way it comes at you, because you no longer get any warning it's about to happen. It comes at you so suddenly because the world of media distribution and news distribution has changed so dramatically with social media and so on. So a story, breaks on you. It's just to be ready, prepared, and to have your spokesperson. You cannot avoid fronting up to the issues and having your spokesperson out front, at least giving your side of the story. And in the absence of that, and if you see any of the big crises, particularly if you think back to last summer and the Console charity scandal, if you remember, there were questions being asked about the finances of the organisation, and the chief executive was never around, never to be seen, never faced or fronted up to the media, and then it grew into a huge story. And then the media start, and rightly so, trying to track down the chief executive to get some comment or other. So it's fronting up to it, and that's the key thing people have to do.
Gavin, you are also heavily involved in Bank of Ireland's Enterprise Town Initiative and are regularly invited to speak at events throughout the country. But I'm wondering, what does a typical week look like for Gavin Duffy? And is it true that you have a PA that starts at 6 a.m. and finishes at 9 p.m?
Said that way, it sounds like I'm contravening employment law, because you're giving the impression it's one person. Look, I'm just one of those people who happens to start work very early in the morning. So look, I wake every morning at 5. I'm at work at 6 a.m. So yes, I have a PA. My office, I have an office in Dublin, but I also have an office in my home as well. And that works through from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. every day. And I have 2 PAs, and they cross over in the middle of the day. So it means, if I return home in the evening and I need to get some work done or something like that, there's a PA there to work with me. I think you can get a lot done if you're fortunate enough to have the type of supports that I have. I think I'm just a very fortunate person because what I do work-wise, I just love doing it, and I think if you love what you're doing, then you don't suffer exhaustion as much as others do, But I do collapse, certainly on a Sunday anyway. I sort of take to the couch for the day.
Now, Gavin, let's get back to the Den for a second. When I heard that you were coming on to this morning's show, local businessman and a man that I know that you have great time for, Graham Scallon wanted me to ask you about your growing business interest within the beauty sector. What's attracted you into investing in the beauty sector?
Karl, because we're old friends, I'll answer that one very honestly for you and say this. Look, I do have strategies, but you know what's strange about the Den? You could be in there and, you have to change the strategy as well. So strategy is a guideline, it's a guiding force for you, but sometimes you have to react with what's in front of you. So, but you're right. Beauty is something that I always have an interest in, and I have to be honest, there's a very significant margin in the beauty business. So yeah, I'm always attracted to high margin businesses, Karl. And look, Karl, you invested in Bricks for Kids, the Lego business, and you brought that franchise into Ireland because, from looking at that, I see that as a high margin business. So, the strategy is to go for businesses where you see a high margin, is it not?
It is. Now, before we go, I know that today is a very special day for you, of course, being your birthday.
How did you know? Somebody in the office told you that during the week.
Your good wife, Orla, was on to me about that. Right?
Yeah, I was sort of conscious of my age earlier on. 57 today, Karl. I know on the radio I don't look that, but there you are. I feel ancient, Karl, and thank you now for reminding me. But I know I'll be cheered up this evening because we're having a lovely family affair later on.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.